of millions.
Yeah, my parents had a helicopter. I know jet fuel is really expensive. That was back in the 90s. It's only more expensive now.
Your parents had a helicopter?
They did. They were news reporters in a helicopter. But I'll leave that aside. Tom Nichols, what I was concerned about, what I thought about when Pete Hegseth was giving that speech was not so much the woke culture war stuff, which I expect. It's the consequences of trying to go after the woke culture war and what gets wrapped up in that. The military has had a problem with sexual assault. It's been a longstanding problem and one that leaders have tried to address. When he's talking about not derailing careers, not listening to the complainers, I wonder, does that send a message to women? If you're assaulted, no one wants to hear it.
It sends a message to everybody. It says if your leader is a toxic jerk whose command is a mess, and you're trying to complain to the IG or to warn your superiors that you have a leader who's somehow off the rails and behaving inappropriately, because this is about more than just women. I mean, basically, Hegseth said, if you are a toxic leader, don't worry, I've got your back. And I think part of that is because the one person Pete Hegseth is tired of people smearing, in his mind, is Pete Hegseth, because the building keeps leaking about what a hot mess Pete Hegseth's Pentagon is. I think that the point of putting all those people in a room was to generate video clips of bold, tough alpha guy Pete Hegseth reading the Riot Act to all of these admirals and generals, many of whom, as I've pointed out many times, were officers when Pete Hegseth was still in high school. And to say, no more wokeism, no more complaining. We don't want to hear anything from, the women. We don't want to hear anything about bad leaders. We don't want, and by the way, in case people are wondering about the beard issue, the men can't have beards because of a shaving exception for a medical condition that falls heavily on black men. The targets of all of this were very clear. It was that Pete Hegseth wants it to be, the Defense Department to be a club, a kind of a frat, and everybody else isn't welcome. I mean, it was really an embarrassing, cringe-inducing speech, but it's pretty much what you'd expect from the most unqualified Secretary of Defense in American history.
And what about the other significant question I have, Mark, about the war crimes? Hegseth was a vocal advocate for a number of soldiers who were accused or convicted of war crimes. And when he's saying that there's not going to be these complaints, there's not going to be these legal tie-ups, I wonder, does it also send a message, much like in the sexual assault way? And tell me if you think I'm going too far. For soldiers who see wrongdoing out there on the battlefield, soldiers who are worried that their fellow soldiers are going too far and maybe crossing a line into committing a war crime.
Yeah, well, first of all, that's a good question. I disagree with most of the answers on everything else that was said. But the issue of war crimes is one of good order and discipline. Good units don't go out in combat and make the kind of war crime-inducing actions that would cause them to be arrested, which would cause them to be prosecuted. I think that was one area where I disagree with Pete Hegseth in terms of going beyond the Geneva Conventions. The Geneva Conventions have stood for decades as our left and right limits of how to operate on the battlefield. I don't think that we should be somehow changing those. All the other issues that have been discussed at this point, I take a different view from.
So tell me what your different view is.
Well, first of all, I did not hear him say anything about wanting to change equal rights, using your words. I've talked to a number of people today about that speech, and while they had many things to say about Pete Hegseth's style and demeanor, I didn't find too many that truly disagreed with his focus on combat readiness and ending some of these culture wars that have been inflicted upon the military. Last, I think that whole issue about flying officers back to Quantico and trying to argue that it's too much of an expense. We have commanders' conferences at every level. The U.S. Army has four-star conferences where they believe to bring the four stars from all over the world to talk. Same thing with the Navy, same thing with the Air Force. Central Command brings all of its combatant commanders from the Middle East back to Tampa for these kind of meetings. So while it was unprecedented that this would be done by a Secretary of Defense, it is done by every other layer of the chain of command. And I've attended weeks and weeks of these kind of face-on-face meetings in 30 years in the military.
And talking about equal rights, I mean, that's what Pete Hegseth said in just the first soundbite I played. He said, we're doing the same with equal opportunity in military equal opportunity policies. The EO and the MEO are at our department.
There is a difference between EO and equal rights. And that's what I think he was trying to come out and say. The equal opportunities sometimes have been weaponized, as has the IG at times. There's been a lot of weaponization of the complaints process. Not a week ago, I was in the Middle East, and I had some officers say they don't want to command units because every private in the unit can write a face